In the October in 2006, a brightly gifted and ambitious young woman named Lindsay Ann Hawker embarked on a journey to Japan in pursuit of learning a new culture, adventure, whilst teaching English. And what began as an exciting chapter in her life soon took a tragic and unimaginable turn. Lindsay Ann Hawker suddenly disappeared, and as the police searched and tensions grew to find the missing teacher, her body would be later discovered just days later in the most horrific way. But how did this disgusting crime happen? And who is the man responsible for this awful crime? Lindsay Ann Hawker was born on the 30th of December in the year of 1984 at the Coventry Hospital in England. She was raised by Phil and Julia Hawker in a loving and supportive family, teaching her the values of kindness, determination, and a passion for life and discovery. Lindsay was the firstborn and had two younger siblings. Lindsay's responsibilities as a role model to her younger siblings were admired. Lindsay had intelligence and a deep compassion for nature. She attended the King Henry VIII School in Coventry and excelled academically from a young age, particularly in science. Her teachers would often praise her dedication to learning and her willingness to assist other classmates who needed support. She had a kind and empathic personality that would only add to her warm charm and likability. Outside of school, Lindsay enjoyed playing sports and listening to music, often singing around her friends, showcasing her well-rounded, vibrant character. And after school, Lindsay went on to pursue a degree in biology at the University of Leeds. She was driven by a passion for learning and a need to make a positive impact in other people's lives. Lindsay was a social butterfly who formed strong relationships and left a lasting impression on those around her. In the year of 2006, Lindsay Ann Hawker graduated with first-class honours of excellence. And though many of her peers pursued a more traditional career, she dreamed of travelling the world and experiencing what life has to offer in other countries, immersing herself in new culture and making a contributing difference to society. Yes, Lindsay wanted to become a teacher, working abroad and teaching English. She told all her friends and family that teaching abroad was her personal goal, and after careful deliberation, she chose to move to Japan. She was captivated by the country's rich history, unique traditions and modern innovations, and so her mind was made up. Her family, however, they had mixed emotions about her choice. Her loving family were concerned about her moving so far away from home, but supported her decision anyway, as they knew they had raised her rightly, and that Lindsay was independent and more than capable of looking after herself, and that she was more than ready to embrace the world on her own terms. And so, just weeks before jetting off to Japan, Lindsay spent quality time with her loving family and friends. She assured them all that she would stay safe, and that she would stay in touch and return home with tales of her adventures. The date was now October in the year of 2006, and Lindsay had arrived in Japan, and she was full of excitement, and she was ready to embrace the new chapter in her life. Her brilliance secured her a position in the largest conversation school in Japan, Nova. The Nova School is known for its extensive quality network of branches and its opportunities to teach conversational English to a wider range of students. It really was the perfect place for Lindsay to begin a professional career in teaching. Lindsay's warm character and empathic personality soon made her a favourite among her eager students. Her kind and approachable personality and her gentle skill set soon created an engaging, positive classroom environment for her students. And yeah, everything for Lindsay was going really good. Everything was on point. Lindsay quickly adapted to her new surroundings and settled in Shiba, a suburban area that's located just outside of Tokyo, sharing a cute and comfortable apartment with 2 other foreign teachers. And yeah, it's true to say these 3 girls became good friends, sharing their experiences and adventures together, and slowly becoming accustomed and adjusting to life in Japan. Lindsay found excitement and joy in her every day-to-day life routine. She would often cycle to Shiba Station and then board a train to work. And in doing this, she found the beauty of her surroundings, helping her to reflect on her day. Throughout her busy work schedule of teaching and receiving emails, phone calls and Skype conversations with school staff and students, Lindsay still found time to maintain regular contact with her family and friends and her boyfriend back in England, keeping them all reassured that she's doing well by sharing her experiences with them. However, unknown to Lindsay, in just 4 days on from her last phone call with her loving family, her promising journey would soon take a dark and tragic turn. A dark and sinister turn that would ultimately lead to her disappearance. Hey guys, after looking at the channel's analytics, I've noticed that half of you returning viewers have not yet subscribed. So let me make a deal with you. If you subscribe to the channel right now, then I promise that I'll bring you true crime content for longer and each and every week. What do you say? Do we have a deal? It takes just 5 seconds, and in return I promise to keep you entertained each and every weekend. Deal? Okay, let's get back to the case. Just 4 days later from the last conversation she had with her loving parents on the phone, Lindsay encountered a 28-year-old Japanese man whilst returning home from work. The man was called Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya was a local man who was born and raised in the Shiba area. His imposing physical presence that was boosted by frequent visits to the gym and martial arts training added to his imposing persona. And despite holding a degree in science, he was unemployed and financially dependent on his wealthy parents. Tatsuya, as a child, had a deeply troubled past, who was known to the police for immature criminal behaviour and violence. And even though Tatsuya had a troubled past with a muscular physique, he seemed nice and really quite charming. He approached Lindsay at the train station, claiming to be one of her students. Tatsuya had a warming smile and a friendly face. He came across as a gentle and respectful person with a calm demeanour and appeared quite harmless. And so with that, Lindsay, being the kind and trusting person she was, engaged in conversation with him, believing him to be a friendly local who was simply seeking to improve his English. However, Tatsuya's intentions were much more sinister after their brief exchange. He followed Lindsay as she cycled back home, keeping pace on foot as he persistently asked her personal questions about taking private lessons. Although Lindsay may have felt somewhat uneasy, her natural politeness led her to remain cautious upon reaching her apartment. And as she tried to end her interaction, Tatsuya was having none of it. And by the time Lindsay arrived back at her place, Tatsuya asked her for a glass of water. Lindsay, somewhat hesitant at first, but allowed him inside as an act of cautious kindness. She introduced him to her 2 roommates, possibly to ensure her own safety by making his presence known. Tatsuya continued to maintain a non-threatening demeanour, even going as far as drawing a picture for Lindsay, and even signing it with his name, telephone number and email address. And yeah, somewhat flattered by this unusual gesture, Lindsay lowered her guard as a compassionate and professional teacher. Now, Lindsay loved helping others, and she genuinely saw this as an opportunity to help someone who was genuinely interested in learning English. When Tatsuya expressed his interest in private lessons, she finally agreed to meet him in a local cafe just 4 days later. Now, although private teaching was technically against Nova's school rules, it wasn't uncommon for teachers to offer private lessons to earn a little extra income on the side. Four days later, Lindsay arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early. Being a familiar and public setting made Lindsay feel safe during the lesson. And during the lesson, Tatsuya behaved normally, reinforcing her belief that he was simply another student eager to learn English. However, as the session came to an end, he claimed he had forgotten the money to pay her, and then suggested that they go to his nearby apartment to retrieve it. Tatsuya was very polite throughout the lesson, and so Lindsay agreed after some reassurance. Lindsay's trusting nature and not wanting to appear rude decided to go along with his suggestion, and with that they both left the cafe together and caught a taxi to his apartment complex. Now, before entering the building, Lindsay demonstrated caution by asking the taxi driver to wait outside, informing him that she'd only be a few minutes or so. Her intentions most likely were to quickly collect the payment and then return. Tragically though, those few minutes would turn into a fateful eternity. In fact, the taxi driver parked up and waited there for almost 12 minutes, and after no sign of Lindsay to be seen anywhere, the taxi driver assumed that she had changed her plans and he simply just drove away, unknown to him that Lindsay had already entered into a dangerous situation from which she would never escape. Because just as soon as Lindsay stepped inside Tatsuya's apartment, his demeanour shifted drastically from a seamlessly polite student. He revealed himself as a vicious predator, and without warning, he struck Lindsay around the head, rendering her unconscious. And what was to follow was an horrific sequence of events that would showcase Tatsuya's cruel and calculated evil intent. Whilst Lindsay lay on the floor unconscious, he tied her hands and feet with plastic ties. He then gagged her with a scarf, ensuring that she could neither call for help nor escape. And over the next several hours, Tatsuya subjected her to severe sexual physical abuse. When Lindsay gained consciousness, she begged and pleaded for her freedom. Tatsuya just stood over her laughing. He found the whole situation funny and entertaining as he touched her body. Eventually, he took the scarf away from around her mouth, allowing her to talk, only on the understanding that she's to remain calm and keep quiet. And by this time Lindsay was terrified and completely in shock, and as she cried in fear and again begging for her freedom, Tatsuya was never gonna let her go. He essayed her for the third time, but this time telling her that he's gonna kill her once he's finished having sex with her. And in pure horror, fear and desperation, Lindsay screamed as loud as she possibly could, hoping and praying that somebody nearby would have heard her screams and come to her rescue. But nobody came to save her, and her screaming only enraged Tatsuya, and whilst being inside her from behind, in the doggy-style position, he wrapped his arm around her neck from behind her. He tensed his arm up, choking Lindsay out in a headlock, and as poor Lindsay struggled to breathe, he tensed his arm up again but tighter, snapping the cartilage in her neck, killing Lindsay almost instantly, whilst at the same time, this monster, this sicko, continued having sex with her lifeless warm body. It was a brutal and calculated act intended to silence her permanently, and once this monster had finished doing the most shameful act to her body, he then shaved off all her head hair in a poor attempt to alter her appearance or delay her identification. He then laid her lifeless body in the bathtub and then put the plug in and ran a small amount of water into the tub. He then filled the bath with a mixture of sand and compost soil to speed up the decomposition. He also sprayed the soil with an organic accelerator, commonly used to compact and decompose waste much quicker. Like, this guy must have had all this planned out in his head beforehand. And given the fact this guy knows his science, he probably truly believed he was going to get away with this. Anyways, one of the neighbours did report hearing strange noises coming from Tatsuya's apartment. However, no action was taken in time to prevent this tragedy from happening. The next day, on the 24th of March in 2007, Lindsay failed to return home after her scheduled private lesson with Tatsuya. Her sudden absence was so unlike her, as she was known for being very responsible. Her absence immediately alarmed her roommates, and so they tried calling her, but there was no answer. And by the following morning, with still no news, their concerns grew. They knew that Lindsay had gone to meet a student for an English lesson, and the details of the man's identity along with the drawing Tatsuya had made for Lindsay soon came to mind, and realising the seriousness of the situation, they reported her disappearance to Nova, and then Nova contacted the police, and then soon after, an investigation was underway. The police acted quickly upon receiving the report, and by using the information provided by Lindsay's roommates, including the hand-drawn picture and Tatsuya's name and contact details, they soon traced the suspect back to his apartment in Shiba. On the 26th day of March in 2007, police officers were dispatched to the apartment just 2 days after Lindsay was last seen. Now, upon arriving at the apartment complex, officers noticed that the curtains were drawn and that there was no visible sign of activity inside. And although the apartment appeared silent, the police believed that somebody might still be inside, and so they didn't knock on the door immediately, as they needed a warrant to justify any possible forced entry into the apartment. So instead they began a surveillance on the property whilst awaiting legal clearance and additional support. Meanwhile, Lindsay's roommates, as well as her family back home in England, were left in a state of growing anxiety and concern. This hard-to-handle uncertainty stretched on, becoming nearly unbearable for Lindsay's parents. Her father, Bill Hawker, would later describe the growing fears as living in hell. He was completely unaware that the worst had already occurred. And on the 26th of March, later that same day, at around 5:40 p.m, the investigation would take a critical turn. Police officers stationed outside Tatsuya's apartment noticed movement and heard faint sounds coming from inside the apartment, suggesting that someone was home. Acting on this, they decided to approach the front door. However, before they could take further action, the door suddenly opened, and there stood Tatsuya, barefooted, carrying a rucksack. And as soon as he spotted the police officers and realised the gravity of the situation, he bolted and ran off down the road. One of the officers managed to grab his rucksack, but Tatsuya slipped free and continued running barefoot down the street. Despite the police officer's best pursuit, Tatsuya was known for his physical fitness and agility. It was easy for him to evade capture, running barefoot through the streets and leaping through people's private gardens. And by the time reinforcements had arrived, Tatsuya had disappeared into the neighbourhood. The rucksack that was left behind contained some gym clothing and some personal items, nothing else. After his escape, police officers finally entered into the apartment, and that's when they made the most horrifying discovery. There on the balcony, and hidden in the bathtub, lay the lifeless body of Lindsay Hawker. The bathtub had been moved from the bathroom to the balcony, with the body and soil mixture still inside. Lindsay's body showed signs of severe physical trauma, consistent with the violent assault she had suffered. Her hands and feet were still tied up, and her face had severe damage and bruising. Lindsay's personal items, including her phone, purse and clothing, were scattered around the apartment, confirming her identity. Now, this gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through both Japan and the United Kingdom, and with news of this brutal murder spreading rapidly and sparking widespread media coverage and public outrage. and the police at this time, they were pretty pissed off. They wanted to catch this killer, and because he managed to get away, that really got to them, and they took it quite personally. The Hawker family, anxiously waiting for news, were devastated when their worst fears were confirmed. The news of Tatsuya's escape spread quickly, fueling anger and fear, and leaving many people questioning, how on earth did he manage to escape, despite being surrounded by multiple officers? Anyways, in the days following his escape, the police launched a nationwide manhunt to find this dangerous killer, before he could potentially strike again. And so with that, Tatsuya was placed on the Japanese most wanted list. The authorities set up a checkpoint and increased patrols, following up on a numerous of sightings. And after 12 weeks, and despite everything the police had tried to do to catch their killer, the trail grew cold, and Tatsuya was by now nowhere to be seen. Fast forward 2 full years, and somehow Tatsuya had managed to stay on the run. In fact, over the period of 2 years, nothing was known as to where he was hiding out. It was like he simply just vanished.
How would any father feel if his daughter was murdered? No one knows how we feel, unless you have lost children yourself.
And that is why hasn't he been caught? And what do they think, or where do they think they can look, or what can they do to try and bring this man out, to draw this rat out of his hole, because he must be hiding somewhere.
And by this point in time, frustration mounted among the police force and the public. He became nearly invisible, moving from place to place without detection. Rumours and unverified sightings only complicated the search efforts further, and finally, the Japanese police put out a reward of 10 million yen for any information leading to his capture, which reignited the public interest in the case. Many more posters of Tatsuya appeared across all cities, in train stations and public spaces, highlighting the possibility of his appearance and the possibility of disguises he could be using during his time on the run. And still, after many months had passed, no calls were made to the police. Nothing came through to verify his whereabouts, of which only begs the question, how was Tatsuya able to evade capture? Well, I'll tell you how. Or maybe I shouldn't, I'm just kidding. The reason why Tatsuya was able to go undetected for so long was because he underwent several cosmetic surgeries to change his entire face. Crazy guy. During his time on the run, he was busy visiting clinics using fake identities and then getting surgeries on his face. At one clinic, he had something done to his eyes to make them look different. And then at the next clinic, he had something done to his nose. He even performed a dangerous crude self-surgery on his own lips to make them look thinner. Whilst being on the run, Tatsuya managed to find work on a construction site in Osaka. He found employment and saved up enough money to fund his facial surgeries. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how he managed to go undetected for so damn long. Crazy guy. In fact, his work colleagues would later describe him as a loner, who rarely engaged in conversation within the workspace. However, in October 2009, Tatsuya made a critical mistake. He visited a cosmetic surgery clinic in Nagoya for another procedure, but due to his many face changes, his fake identity was no longer adding up. The staff working in the clinic were also aware that the police were looking for a specific person around the same age with a similar description, and so the staff became suspicious and discreetly contacted the police. The next day, on the 10th of November, the police moved in and finally apprehended him as he was trying to board a boat to take him to a different part of the city. Tatsuya had managed to go on court for 2.5 years, living a normal life and right under law enforcement's noses.
The family of murdered British teacher Lindsay Hawker are flying out to Japan ahead of the trial of their daughter's alleged killer. Lindsay was found dead in a sand-filled bathtub on the balcony of Tatsuya Ichihashi's apartment in Tokyo in March 2007. The accused, who had been one of Lindsay's students, went on the run for 2.5 years following her murder, but was finally caught in 2009. During this time, Lindsay's family never gave up in their pursuit of justice for the 22-year-old.
And help us get justice for this girl that she so rightly deserves.
And speaking at London's Heathrow Airport on Saturday, Bill Hawker, with his wife and 2 daughters, reiterated the message that the family have maintained since her death.
We're hoping to get justice for our daughter. That has always been our own aim, our only aim. I can't say anything else other than that today. But we're a strong family and we're going to see this through to the end. All we want is justice for Lindsay.
Classed as victim participants under Japanese law, the family will have the chance to question Ichihashi and potentially see the justice that they've sought for so long eventually served.
Bill Hawker made an emotional appeal, urging the courts to impose the harshest sentence. And on the 21st of July, in the year of 2011, the Pachiaoba District County Court read their verdict. Tatsuya was found guilty of SA and murder and was sentenced to life in prison. The courts acknowledged the severity of the crime, but because Tatsuya showed some remorse, the death penalty was not enforced. The Hawker family expressed their disappointment with the verdict, as they hoped for a harsher sentence, that being death, but they were also relieved to know that Tatsuya would spend the rest of his life behind bars.
This has been a long, hard battle for the Hawkers, and the battle is over. We worked tirelessly as a family. We've never given in for our daughter. We've never given in. We wanted justice, and we've finally got justice.
Lindsay's parents continue to honour her memory. They set up a foundation to help young people who wish to study and work abroad, ensuring safety, and that Lindsay's legacy will live on through the dreams of others. And as for Tatsuya, he remains incarcerated for life at the Naguno prison. In 2012 he published a book titled Until I Was Arrested, detailing his time on the run. He offered all the royalties to the Hawker family, but they declined, stating that no amount of money could ever compensate for his evil actions. Hey there, and thank you for enjoying yet another one of our evil videos. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel if you're a fan of true crime. And let me know about your thoughts about this case in the comment section below. And as always, I shall see you next time when evil follows. Bye.